debate on the decriminalization of adultery. What is adultery? It refers to a married person having an affair with the other man or the other woman. Of course, this type of extramarital affair should be frowned up. In some countries, this behavior violates the civil code and victims can request compensation. In addition to violating the civil code, in some countries, it also violates the criminal code. In other words, adultery is a criminal offense which not only demands compensation but also jail time. Is adultery really so despicable and unforgivable that it warrants sentencing? Let us follow the stories of May, June, and Lei. Upon graduating from university, May went matchmaking, got married, then had children, and brought up her 2 kids. At 40, she decided to enter the workforce, and thus she met Ming, who was single. Romance blossomed and Lei had an affair. May's husband is a local figure and he was unwilling to be cuckolded. So after gathering evidence, he insisted on taking legal action against May's infidelity. May and Ming are deeply in love and wants to be together forever. Does this really constitute a crime? If they belong to these countries, then it's a crime. North Korea, Philippines, India, and all Islamic countries. How about in Taiwan? Is infidelity a crime? Yes, it is a criminal offense in Taiwan. So May and Ming both go to jail for a year, and May also loses custody of her children. Even her friends and family can't forgive her. Why does the law in Taiwan treat adultery as a crime? According to Article 239 of our criminal code, marriage and family are the cornerstones of society. And even if affection no longer exists between a husband and wife, the marriage itself should be protected by the law. Therefore, those who betray the covenant of a marriage should be jailed. The threat of being jailed likewise acts as a deterrent to extramarital affairs, thus ensuring harmony of marriage, family, and society. This is the first reason to support the criminalization of adultery. The second story. After June got married, she gave up her dreams and stayed home to be a full-time housewife to allow her husband to focus on furthering his career. Little did she know while money came in, his heart went out. Her husband had fallen in love with the company's accountant, Lee, whose naivety and inexperience meant she was easily cajoled into a relationship. June, desperate and heartbroken, wanted a divorce but was also hesitant because she has no job or property. If she divorced, life would be impossible. So she consulted a lawyer on how to gather evidence. Why does June want to gather evidence of adultery? Because according to Article 1052 of the Civil Code, if her husband committed adultery, she can petition for a divorce and half of her husband's property plus a monthly alimony. So by classifying adultery as a crime, it protects women such as June who are at an economic disadvantage. This is the second reason to support the criminalization of adultery. June's husband later realized the affair was worse than the fallout, so he begged June to forgive him, and further twisted the truth to say Lee was the succubus who seduced him. So June withdrew her case and forgave him, but insisted on suing Lee. As a result, on top of having to pay compensation, Lee was also jailed for a year. Thus, the inexperienced Lee lost both her lover and her money, not to mention the stamp on her record that precludes future employment. So we see, to protect marriages and the livelihood of economically disadvantaged women, Taiwan's law classifies adultery as a crime. But let us probe deeper. Does a secure, long-lasting marriage ultimately depend on the law or the affection between a couple? If the law truly secures our marriages, then why is Taiwan's divorce ratio the third highest in the world, with extramarital affairs being the primary cause? This is the first reason for a decriminalization of adultery. Let's now turn our attention to the 3 people here. Who do you think is most likely to be sued? The unfaithful wife, the disloyal husband, or the other woman. According to expert analysis, 77% of unfaithful wives are sued by their husbands because most men are unwilling to be cuckolds. However, only 50% of disloyal husbands are sued by their wives because most eventually choose to forgive. But to excess some degree of vigilance, the outsiders are always sued, while the lustful husbands get away with it. So all in all, in a system where adultery is criminalized, women still seem to get the shorter end of the stick. And this is the second reason for a decriminalization of adultery. The third reason for the decriminalization of adultery is that it violates an individual's sexual autonomy. What is sexual autonomy? It means the right of every adult to freely decide who to be with and with whom to have intimate sexual relations. So to use force or to otherwise stop your other half from having sexual relations with an outsider is to violate their sexual autonomy. For 62 years, adultery was also a crime in South Korea, Article 241 Criminal Code, but it was repealed on January 26, 2015. So now South Korea is an adultery decriminalized country. One of the reasons for this was that Article 241 violates sexual autonomy. Lastly, the fourth reason against the criminalization of adultery is that if adultery is a crime, it can be used against victims of sexual assault by smearing them as accomplices. For example, Lee may not have liked the boss or was coerced into sex and reported the sexual assault to Jun. But Jun feared the fallout would damage her husband's career and thus threatened Lee not to report it to the police, or else she'd sue her for adultery. Poor Lee now suffers in silence because it's much harder for a female employee to present evidence of the sexual assault than it is for a silent wife to present evidence of